Everyone. So today we will see the last bit of the D block element, that is the stability of higher oxidation state. Hope we have gone through the last session, that is the trends, that is the M2 plus and M, and also M3 plus slash M2 plus. Okay. So when you consider the stability of higher oxidation state, we mainly talk about the halides as well as the oxides. So there is a table in the textbook, just go through it. You can see the type of halides which you have seen in the various elements. That is only talking about the 3D series. That is scandium, titanium, vanadium, chromium up to zinc. Okay. So when halides, titanium will have X4. That is titanium is plus 4. Then vanadium, that is mainly fluorides. You have seen stable oxidation state in fluorides when talk about halides. Okay. So vanadium is plus 5, then chromium is plus 6 oxidation state. See the halides, in these halides you will have higher oxidation state like plus 4, plus 5, plus 6. Then manganese, actually manganese is F4, MnF4, that is plus 4 state. But in MnO3F, in this compound, that is MnO3F, manganese, that is minus 1, minus 2, that is 6 plus 7. In this MnO3F, the manganese will have a plus 7 oxidation state. But normally when you speak about the fluoride of manganese, it will have a maximum of plus 4 oxidation state. Okay. So that is why normally in halides and that too in fluorides, you can have variable higher oxidation states or stable higher oxidation state. Okay. Then there are two reasons for that, especially that of fluoride. The fluorides are having more higher stable oxidation state. One is due to the high lattice enthalpy. That is in the case of cobalt fluoride, that is minus 1, that is plus 3. That is the plus 3 oxidation state. It is due to the high lattice enthalpy of fluorine. And the second point is the high bond enthalpy of fluorine. So these two, the high lattice energy is mainly for this plus 3 oxidation state, and for higher oxidation state like plus 5, plus 6, etc., the high bond enthalpy of fluorine accounts for it. So that is the main point regarding the stability of higher oxidation state in halides, and that too especially in the case of fluorides. So you will see in that table what all halides can be seen. And manganese can have maximum of 4 in fluoride, but when MnO3F comes, it will have an oxidation state of plus 7. The two value points in this is why the fluorides has got stable higher oxidation state is, first one is for plus 3 oxidation state, it is due to the high lattice enthalpy of fluorine. You know lattice enthalpy, right? Lattice enthalpy provided by the lattice. And second is the high bond enthalpy in the higher oxidation state of fluorine. So these two accounts for the higher or stable oxidation state of fluorides. Then you come to the oxides. Oxides means, now when compared to fluorine, oxygen has got more stable higher oxidation state. So the ability of oxygen to stabilize higher oxidation state exceeds that of fluorine. Because in oxygen, when compared with oxides, oxides has got higher oxidation state than what halides or fluorides. Why? Because the point is, oxygen is able to form multiple bond with metals. That is very, very important. So why it has got more higher oxidation state or stable higher oxidation state? Why? Because this oxygen can have multiple bonds, isn't it? For example, in the case of Mn2O7, in Mn2O7, this 2 manganese is bridged by an oxygen atom which is tetrahedrally bounded to oxygen atom, other oxygen atom. Manganese 2, 4, 6 and 7, 2, 4, 6 and 7, oxygen is 2. So this is a bridged oxygen atom. So that is why due to the multiple bond formation with metals, the oxygen or the oxides are more stable than that of halides. Okay, so that is very simple. So this is all about the stability of higher oxidation state. So just go through the book, you will see the table and analyze the table and see the oxidation state of the oxidation state. Now one more point is, in this oxidation state, copper 1 compound are unstable in aqueous solution. Always previous year question paper you can see this question. It's a very, very important question. Why copper 1, that is plus 1 oxidation state, are unstable in aqueous solution? Why? Because this copper undergoes disproportionation reaction. You know what is disproportionation reaction? In the same reaction, the oxidation or the oxidation state are different. So that is, see, in this case it is plus 1, in this case it is plus 2 and this is 0. See, when it disproportionate, it will have the oxidation state which is different from that of this left hand side. That is disproportionation reaction. So why the answer for this, that is why copper plus 1 compounds are unstable in aqueous solution is, it undergoes, the first value point is, it undergoes disproportionation reaction. Okay, it undergoes disproportionation reaction in aqueous solution. And the second value point is, it has got the Cu2 plus, very important, Cu2 plus has got a high negative hydration enthalpy value. That is the second value point. Just note the value point, that's all. Okay, that is the copper 2 plus has got a high negative hydration enthalpy which compensates the first and second enthalpy of copper. Or just write this Cu2 plus has got a high negative hydration enthalpy and in aqueous solution it disproportionate into Cu2 plus and Cu0. Why it becomes Cu2 plus? Because it is having a high negative hydration enthalpy. Okay, so just note it down. This is very important. So that's all about the stability of higher oxidation state. Okay, we will see some of the properties of transition elements, okay, or D block elements. The first property is magnetic property. Okay. When a metal is applied to a magnetic field, two types of magnetism they will show. One is paramagnetism and second is the diamagnetism. That is when when paramagnetic means what? Paramagnetic means it will attract. When an applied field is given, it will attract that. That is called as paramagnetism. When it gets repelled, it is called as diamagnetism. Okay. Now ferromagnetism is also an extreme case of paramagnetism where it will attract in the presence of an applied field. Now almost all the transition elements are paramagnetic except you can see the last members like zinc, cadmium, mercury, which has got fully orbitals. So other than that, all other has got paramagnetic in nature. Paramagnet means what? It contains unpaired electrons, that is the d electrons. Okay. Then the diamagnetic means paired electrons are there. Ferromagnetic means it is also attracted by the applied magnetic field. Okay. So these are the three magnetic. Now as you know that the transition elements are paramagnetic because it contains unpaired electrons, isn't it? So now for an electron there are two types of momentums are there. One is the spin angular momentum and second is orbital angular momentum. We have studied that, okay, in the quantum numbers. Now we are only considering the 3D series, that is the first series like scandium, titanium up to zinc. Now in this 3D series only the spin angular momentum is taken into account and the orbital angular momentum we are getting omitted. So you don't want to go into detail of that. You just note that you are only considering in the first series, this only add to consider only the spin angular momentum. Now if we consider the spin angular momentum, you can calculate the magnetic moment which is denoted by mu is equal to root of n into n plus 1. Listen, for an electron, paramagnetism is shown by most of the transition elements because due to the unpaired electrons. Now for an electron, there are two types of momentum, angular momentum, that is one is the spin angular momentum because it is spinning in its own axis, and second is the orbital angular momentum. Why? Because it revolves around the orbit. Now when you consider the 3D series, you only take into consideration of the spin angular momentum, right? Now by considering the spin angular momentum, we can calculate the magnetic moment which is represented by mu. Mu is equal to root of n into n plus 1. Now if n is the number of unpaired electron. Now what is n? N is the number of unpaired electron. Now for one electron, if there is only one electron, that is unpaired electron, that is root of 1 into 1 plus 1. That is 1 plus 1, 2, root 2, that is 1.75. And the unit is Bohr magneton, that is BM. Just write BM, Bohr magneton. So this is how you calculate the magnetic moment. So if you know the number of unpaired electron, you can calculate the magnetic moment. And as the number of electron increases, that is from scandium to copper, zinc. Zinc is already filled, so it will be 0. So number of unpaired electron is 0. So till copper, you can calculate the number of magnetic moment by knowing the number of unpaired electrons. So that is the first property, that is magnetic property. Clear? That is the main point is almost all the transition elements are what paramagnetic in nature. That is, it attracts to the applied magnetic field. Now the second property is they form colored compounds. You know the chemistry behind the colored compounds, right? Because when a d electron gets excited from the ground level by absorbing the energy, when it re-emits in the visible region, you will get the color of that compound, isn't it? And the color you are getting will be the complementary color for the absorbed frequency. See, by absorbing certain amount of frequency, you know E is equal to h nu, quantum mechanics. E is equal to h nu, it is getting absorbed and it is getting into a higher excited state from a ground state by absorbing the energy. In the higher level, it is unstable, thereby it will re-emit by emitting the radiation, and that comes in the visible region mainly for all the transition metals. So that is why you can say that all transition elements forms colored compounds. Okay, actually it forms a complexes. You have a table in your textbook where this will form complexes with the water and form the color. And the given color or the color which we will see is a complementary color for which the frequency is absorbed. Okay. Now by knowing the color, you can know the frequency of that line. So that is about the colored compound. You know the chemistry, so that I am not going into detail. Okay. Now comes the third is, as you all know, the transition metals or the d block elements are very, very known for its complex formation. I already told you in the oxidation state where the transition metals or the d block metals have a zero oxidation state while forming complexes, and the example I gave you is NiCO 4 times, where the nickel is having an oxidation state of 0, isn't it? Okay. So it forms a lot of complexes. Why? Because of these three reasons, very, very important. The first is the small size of the metal ion. You know the size gets decreased when you come from or when you go from left to right in that d block series, isn't it? You are now considering only the 3D series of importance. So from scandium to zinc, the size of the metal ion decreases. Why? Because the effective nuclear charge increases. That is again because of the poor shielding of the d electrons in the d orbitals. Correct. Now that is the small size of the metal ion, it can form complexes. Second is a high charge, isn't it? Due to the variable oxidation state, it is having high charge, that is manganese up to +7. See, so due to the high charge of this metal ion and also the availability of the d orbitals for bonding. Now if there is absence of d orbitals, you cannot have complexes, isn't it? So there must be an availability of vacant d orbitals in order to bond formation. So these three are the important points why the transition elements forms complexes. So just keep in mind, one is the small size of the metal ion. Second is the high charge of the metal ion, because it can have variable oxidation state or higher oxidation state. And three is the availability of d orbitals for bonding. Okay, so these 3 points makes the transition elements form more complexes. Right. Now comes the fourth property, that is almost all the transition elements are having the catalytic property or the catalytic property. You know what's a catalyst? A catalyst is a substance which can undergo no change in chemical reaction, but it alters the speed of the chemical reaction, or it reduces the speed of reaction without undergoing any change by itself, isn't it? Now, when you come across with catalyst, you have studied so many catalysts, right? In the Haber process, what was the catalyst? Iron as a catalyst, isn't it? So, where is the iron comes? In the transition series, 3D series. Now, where you studied about molybdenum as a promoter. Where is molybdenum? In the transition series, isn't it? Now, when you go for contact process in sulfuric acid, isn't it? You talk about vanadium pentoxide as a catalyst. Now, where is vanadium? That is also in the 3D series. So, almost all the elements, not all, but still, majority can be used as a catalyst in the reactions. Okay, that is again a property related to the transition elements. Okay. Now, what will the catalyst do? It will arrange the surface for the reactant, isn't it? Surface for the reactants, and the reactants will come into the catalytic surface, and it will weaken that bond, isn't it? And the old bond is removed and the new bond is formed in the surface of the catalyst. And the main point is, here the activation energy is reduced by the catalyst. It is very important. Okay, the catalyst, the activation energy is being lessened by means of catalyst. Now we will see what are the points to remember in the catalytic property. The transition elements, since it can form variable oxidation state, that is the first point. Second point is it can form complexes. Then I have already told you that the reactant, the surface of the catalyst will provide for the formation of the new bond for the reactants to make products. Thereby the weakening of bond will take place and the activation energy will be very, very small. Okay, low. Now the third important point is, this is very important, these transition metal ions, right? For example, iron Fe3 plus or cobalt 2 plus or nickel 2 plus, etc. These ions can change the oxidation state in the catalysis. Now, while doing the reaction or while having the reaction, when you add this catalyst, what the catalyst will do, some catalysts can change their oxidation state. For example, in this reaction, see, this I minus plus S2OA thiosulfate ion give, the I minus is reduced to iodine and this is oxidized to sulfate ion. See, I minus plus S2OA 2 minus gives I2 plus 2SO4 2 minus. In this reaction, we are using Fe3 plus as a catalyst. Listen, we are using the Fe3 plus as a catalyst. Now, what this catalyst will do, I have told you, this can change the oxidation state because it is having a variable oxidation state. Now, see, two steps reactions takes place. In the first step, what will happen? This Fe3 plus, which is a catalyst, it reacts with this I minus iodide ion to form this iodine, reduced to iodine, changing the oxidation state of Fe3 plus to what? Fe2 plus. See, it is changing the oxidation state from +3 to +2. Then again what will happen? Because you know the catalyst does not undergo any type of change in the reaction. So it has to come back again to the Fe3 plus. Now see, in the second step what happens is this Fe2 plus react with this S2OA 2 minus to form, again see what will happen, the same Fe3 plus comes back, Fe3 plus plus the product SO4 2 minus. So that is important. That is, in the catalytic property, even the metal ions can change their oxidation state. And the second point, if the transition metals are having variable oxidation state, the third point is they form complexes. Okay. Even the catalyst will reduce the activation energy. Okay. Then the next property is interstitial compounds. The transition elements can form interstitial compounds. Now, what do you mean by this interstitial compounds? Now, if you study about the lattice of a compound, for example, you have studied NaCl lattice, right? NaCl, we will study in solid state. Okay. So, when we studied about this lattice, there are some space between this lattice which you have called as voids. Okay, we will see later in the solid state. Now, what happens is, this small elements like hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, etc. gets trapped in this space between this cation and the anion. That is the lattice. there is some interstitial, so these are called as interstitial compound. That means there are interstitial spaces are there in which small elements like hydrogen, carbon or nitrogen can be trapped into this space. And such compounds are called as interstitial compounds. For example, see titanium carbide, TiC, Mn4n, that is in the case of Mn, nitrogen is getting trapped, or Fe3H, hydrogen is trapped. Now see this vanadium hydride, see the formula, it is a non-stoichiometric compound, see VH0.5. These are all, don't worry about it, we will study in the solid state. Okay, I will teach you after the coordination chemistry. Okay. So this is non-stoichiometric compound, that is point fraction is there. Okay, this can happen. Okay, this type can happen. And also titanium hydride, TiH 1.7. This is also a non-stoichiometric compound. So we will study in detail in the solid state. So this is called as interstitial compound. So transition elements can form what type of compounds? Interstitial compounds. And the space you call it as voids. Now see, this is also important. What are the characteristics of interstitial compounds? So when a small element trapped into the lattice of this transition elements, what are the characteristics of this interstitial compounds? Now first characteristics is they are having a high melting point because one more element is included, or we will say occlusion, right? Interstitial. So high MP when with respect to the normal transition elements. Second is they are hard because the density is more, because in the voids there are small elements like hydrogen, carbon or nitrogen. So it is hard. Okay, some boranes are more harder than diamond, it says. Okay. Now then the metallic conductivity, it retains the metallic conductivity. It is still, even though these interstitial compounds, it will retain their metallic conductivity. And the last point is they are chemically inert. So these are the 4 points or the characteristics of interstitial compounds. Okay. And the last one is alloy formation. I am not going to elaborate on alloy formation because you all know what is an alloy, how it is prepared, etc. Okay, what is an alloy? Alloy is a homogeneous mixture of two metals or a metal or a non-metal. And you know the preparation, how it is prepared? It is prepared by a primary metal, heating a primary metal. Primary metal means a metal which is abundant, and putting the desired quantity of the secondary metal. Then you cool it at the room temperature, you will get an alloy. Okay. You know what is alloy of bronze. What is alloy of bronze? Alloy of bronze is copper and tin, isn't it? Copper and tin. Brass is copper and zinc. Then stainless steel and iron is the primary metal. When it is mixed with the 2% carbon, you will get stainless steel. So these are some of the solder. Is an alloy of tin and lead. So many alloys. Then if it is mercury, you call it as galvanized. You will call it as amalgam. When one of the metal is mercury, you call that alloy to be amalgam, zinc amalgam, isn't it? So all these are alloys. Now what is the peculiarity behind the transition elements? Since it has got similar radii, that is a value point. Since the transition metals has got similar radii and all these characteristic properties, they can form what? Alloys. Okay, so the point is they have got similar radii, so that the formation of alloy is very easy. Okay. So these are some of the properties of transition elements or D block elements, and so there comes the end of the D block. Okay. So we will see the F block and then coordination. So till then, thank you.